Goodness. Surprise Saturday, though? Why not? Why not, baby? What is up, everybody, and welcome to an emergency pod edition of the DNVR Nuggets Podcast. This emergency pod is presented by Xfinity. Imagine that. Emergency pod, a very unique one. There's no breaking news, Harrison. There's no crazy trade or anything. But what we got today, just a few hours ago, is, in my opinion, the most insightful 2-hour, very detailed conversation with Nikola Jokic with my guy Eden out in Serbia, where he revealed so much stuff that we had to hop on a show and talk about it. So I'm joined by Harrison. Wind, am I going too hard? Or is this honestly, it's just such a fascinating one-on-one?
I think you hit it right on the head. We were just talking about this so much in our chat. There's so much that was said, so much revealed, I feel like. We just all decided we had to talk about it. We got to talk it out.
We have to, man, because it was 2 hours long, and I highly do not watch this in place of, right. It is in Serbian, it's subtitled, so you're gonna have to read for 2 hours straight. But I'm telling you, it's worth it. So after you watch this show, if you're intrigued, I highly recommend you go and check it out over on the X's and O's podcast, hosted by Aiden, who is a big name in European hoops. He does a lot of play-by-play for broadcast games. European basketball games, and then he has this very popular podcast where he gets a lot of NBA players, mostly from the Balkans, and he got a one-on-one with Nikola in his house, by the way. And what a setup it was too, with the MVPs in the trophy there.
It was a nice setup. Is that the mantle that Yoke said a little while ago that his wife thought was, too bare, so they had to put all the trophies there?
Maybe. In my head, though, I will say, if that is the mantle, in my head, I pictured this giant display with a million. Because he's always says that's where he keeps his basketballs, whatever, triple doubles or whatever. And right. I was like, I picture like a whole entire room or something.
I know. I kind of wanted to see more of Jokic's house, to be honest. Maybe we'll get that in the next sit-down interview. An MTV Crib style tour.
I would guess not. We only have limited time today, though, so I want to get right into the notes here. We're basically just going to go through what we both found to be so fascinating with it, and I'm just going to go in chronological order. Again, check this out. Hopefully intrigues you, and then you will want to watch this at some point, even though you have to read the entire time. It can be a little bit of a slog, but I thought Jokic was very open. He has a great relationship with Aiden. And as do I. This is a guy that I met years back, and now he comes to town about once a year, and we always end up going out to get great stories from him and, some great insight. But he has a great relationship with Nikola, as evidenced by Nikola opening up so much. So here's my first note. It's fun because they go in chronological order in this, and he talks a lot about the discomfort he has with fame, which is something we've always known about him. We've always, discussed this about him, but he really does. I think one of the core traits you walk away from this, he talks about being asleep when he's drafted. That's not a fake. That's a real thing that happened. And he just said that because his journey was so fast, he got discovered late, and his rise was so fast, he never had time to adjust to that fame. And it was almost like it all happened so fast that he didn't have time to digest it, which I think is a key part of his personality now that he is super famous.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because if you think about it, he gets drafted, he's over in Europe for the year, and then the next season he comes to the Nuggets. And he talked about this a lot, just being a rookie and not being able to understand anything. And all these vets he was around, Mike Miller, Jameer Nelson. And those first, 3-4 years seemed like they went so fast he didn't have time to come up and take a breath.
Yeah.
And then it totally makes sense because now, for the last couple years, at least, I'll say, maybe post-pandemic championship year to now, I think we see Nikola Jokic way more comfortable in his own skin than he was right when he got drafted. And he talked about that a lot.
Yeah. And it made me think, Christian Brown did the pod with Cam Johnson, and he was talking a similar story where his rise was really fast. In fact, Christian Brown talks about how on his AAU team going into Peach Jam, he wasn't even a starter. A guy misses some practices, so he gets thrown in there, has a great tournament, and all of a sudden now he's getting recruited, by KU and stuff. So his rise was really quick, and I think there's something to that. Because I always talk about I'm coaching my daughter. She's 9 years old, very early in her development. But even I at this stage can see the path where kids get separated very early. And it might be by 12, 13 years old, you get 80% of the kids who will be the best kids, the ones that will be D1s and WNBA players or whatever. They're already identified and separated. And so those types of people, and Peyton Watson's one of them, Michael Porter's another one, those people kind of see it coming. It's like they have 8 years to prepare for, I'm going to be an NBA player. This is my life. And I'm around. For Nikola, it's like he gets drafted and he's a no-name.
Yep.
And then he has the breakout year where he wins the championship. Next thing you know, he's in Denver. And the year after that, he's the starter and cornerstone piece. It was all so fast that he just didn't have time to process it.
Yeah. And he's at Summer League, or I think said he was at Summer League, and his brother's buying hundreds and hundreds of pairs of socks because they just don't know what they have disposable income for the first time. They're like, what should we do? Let's just buy a bunch of new socks.
I loved that detail because, one, he was talking about how when you come over, he's like, I don't have any money. And all of a sudden I'm drafted in the NBA. And there's all these obligations. You have to, you're coming over, you're training. You have to find a place to live. And he explains that you got $75,000, which is a small amount compared to what he's at now, but they give him $75,000 and he has to find an apartment. And he says he comes home it sounded like one of the first days after the check, and his brothers had bought all these socks. And he's like, what are you doing? And I love this detail because it gives you an insight into his brain a little bit. He's like, what are you guys doing? We don't have any money. Right. And they're like, hey, we have $75,000. We went shopping. I thought that was a really, really good detail about that dynamic.
Yeah. And then they bought that apartment, or I don't know, maybe rented it, the one right next to Coors Field.
Yep.
I don't know if that was in the interview, but I just knew that.
Well, he also said that he was the one that picked the apartment because they were like, yeah, the team will provide you someone who will basically do that for you. And he was like, no, I want to. He's like, that's something I should do. I should be the one.
I think it's interesting because a lot of the rookies just live across the street from the arena in those apartments there right across the river. And I think the team, I don't know this for sure, I think the team gives them a couple options of what to pick from right when they're drafted. I don't know if that apartment Jokic chose was in the itinerary for the rookies, but he definitely chose it for a reason.
He talks about we obviously know his two brothers extremely close to him, and he actually talked a lot about the relation. I feel like we learned more about their relationship in this podcast than we did, previously. But one, I'm always fascinated by the fact that he's almost a decade younger than them and just grew up going everywhere. Part of the story here, we're going to get to the part where he goes to bars or kafanas at a very early age.
He talked about kafanas like they are.
You have to see it. It's true though. He waxes poetic about the importance.
Like it's Nirvana.
It's so funny, man. But growing up with older brothers, he talks a lot about that is his development is he's just naturally around bigger kids and adults. And so he's doing all their things and he learned things from them. And he said, and there was a great quote in here where he said he learned skill from Nemanja and he learned discipline and strength and training from Strahinja. But that they both were so different, but they both were like basketball. I don't want to say idols to him, but he looked up to them. And so he's constantly taking something from them. And I just thought that was such a cool detail.
Yeah. I mean, he said a lot that, obviously growing up and learning everything from his brothers was such a huge influence on his life. And then, his brother playing in the States at University of Detroit was also a massive just factor in him even coming over here in the first place. And, knowing what we know about his brothers, I think you see a little bit of both in him, you see parts of Strahinja, you see parts in Nemanja, all in Jokic.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And then when he talks a lot about the vets, I just think Jokic's a guy, we always think about leadership, this or that. Like he's a guy that has been led by people 10 years older than him his whole life. So there's this natural, he's looking to those people for advice and things. Some other quick details here. Jokic says, and this is another interesting thing, he learns by seeing, not by hearing explanations, which I thought was really fascinating and maybe leads to why he's maybe a little bit slower of a vocal leader. He talked a lot about the importance of coaches. I mean, he has a very old school opinion that coaches are still the leaders of the team. They're still the ones that ultimately run those things, and a good coach has to know how to do that. But he also, it just sounds like he's not one of these guys that we think of him as a basketball genius. He likes to just get pattern recognition, play the game, see it, this or that. I don't know that he's somebody that loves to like study, it sounds like studying the, just let's talk through it. Let's talk and think through. He's very impressed by people who can. He talked about coaches that are able to just sit and talk for 2 hours about their offensive system. But for him, he just has to see it. That's how he learns.
Yeah. I love that detail. And going back to the vet thing real quick, did you know that detail about Mike Miller?
Which one?
That Mike Miller wore suits to every game?
No, that was actually really, and I don't remember it either.
I don't either. But, Yoke was talking about his vets, Jameer Nelson, Mike Miller, who obviously had a big influence on him, especially Mike Miller. And he said Mike Miller wore suits to every game. And obviously Yoke didn't back then, but I do wonder if that was part of his thinking and starting to wear suits the last several years. I don't know.
It's entirely possible, man. It is kind of interesting to think of. He spoke very glowingly of Mike Miller and Jameer Nelson in particular. And Jameer Nelson, I mean, he speaks with such reverence for those guys in a way that I thought was really interesting. He also said he loves 3-on-3 basketball. And I know from talking to Voya back in the day and some of the other guys when we were in Serbia that 3-on-3 was big in Serbia, that's kind of a big thing. And he made it sound almost like he likes 3-on-3 basketball better than regular basketball. And it made me think about so much of basketball there's 5 guys on the court, but you're really running 2-man or 3-man actions. Everybody else, the other 2 guys are spacing the floor. And it does make me think about how much of Jokic's game is molded by this idea of everything is 3-man actions.
I mean, if you think about how the Nuggets run their offense,
3
men.
Split
action.
It's
about 3 guys.
Yeah, 3 guys.
That has really, the Nuggets offense is so centered around that. And Yoke had a really cool detail where he was talking about how Golden State built a dynasty off of that.
Yeah.
Or, a lot of their championships came from, that split cut action and just how their offense ran. And now the Nuggets are kind of running that really similar thing as well, but except from the elbow instead of the post. And that involves 3 guys.
It's just 3-man basketball. He can even name 3-on-3 legends. Like he's so into it that was the thing is he's like, no, man, these guys, this is who I loved back in the day. I love watching this guy. I love watching 3-on-3. And I think that's interesting. I just put my daughter in a 3-on-3 league. And I not because of this, of course, but I have her in it. And I was thinking similar things where I'm like, at this age, at 9 years old, I think 3-on-3 is, you'll get more out of it than 5-on-5 because 5 kids, it just becomes a cluster.
That's a good point.
So I'm kind of interested here. Let's go. I want to talk here now about, this is one of the big stories. He started going to bars or kafanas as they're called. It really is more bar than club. It's bar. It's like you go, the kafana culture, you go to drink and hang out. And he started going at 10 with his dad. And the way he speaks about it are like, that's where I learned to be a man. I learned how you're supposed to behave, how you conduct yourself in public. He does joke that it's how you learn how to order a drink and all these different things, but he makes it sound like those times where he was the 10-year-old with all the old men, that was like his wisdom years. That's where he's growing into the world. And to me, it was so, like you said, he's not being tongue in cheek. He's speaking very reverently about, this is what made me, going to the bar with my dad.
Yeah. It's like he made it sound like he was a different person before he went to the kafanas with his dad, and he walked out of there a different person afterward. Like, it seems like he got taught many, many life lessons. Like you said, how to order a drink, how to talk to a waiter, but also just, life lessons outside of that in a bar in Sombor.
And if you think about it, it's like, this is why it's so fascinating to me, because I always love the intersection of culture and identity and personality and all those things. And for me, Jokic is very much he has a belief, it seems. After watching this, it's like he has a belief of how things should be, how a person should act, how a man should be. And he talks a lot about being emotional. He's a very emotional guy. Says He cries a lot, he says, which is funny because he wins a championship and he's just stoic. You can't see anything. But he says, yes, but if you were with me at the Kafanas, it's very common to see me cry. I cried. If it's a good song, I'll cry. I cry. I'm very emotional just in very specific settings. And the Kafana to him really does seem like it's an important part of his life.
Yeah. It seems like it's absolutely shaped him. I mean, he even said, when he was talking about what motivates him, it's, there's a lot of basketball things. Yeah. Winning motivates him. Playing well motivates him. A weight room motivates him. But he's also motivated by, things in life. And there are certain things in life that keep him going. One of those is being around good people. One of those is a good drink.
A good drink. He lists 6 things, Harrison. He says, or maybe 5. He says playing well, a good routine, a good weight room, good company, and good drinks. And then he ends it by saying, that's it. That's it.
No more, no less.
That's the extent of my motivation.
He also did start talking about his kids now. That's a motivating factor as well. You can add that to the list.
Yeah. Here's another one that I think is really interesting for me, or a couple things. He talks about not being afraid to lose, not being afraid to miss shots. But then later on, and he says, it's just my nature. I'm a guy that just doesn't get afraid of those things. But later on, he says, well, I am nervous. It's not that I'm not nervous. And then he kind of stops and it's like, yeah, well, maybe it is fear. But what I mean is it's like a good fear. It's a fear that I accept. Like I'm not afraid to lose. But in that moment, you do feel the pressure and you feel the nerves. And I thought to me, this was a perfect articulation of what I think is the healthy relationship to pressure. It's not a denial of it, which a lot of people say, I don't even feel it. Quiet. He kind of starts with that, but he quickly backtracks to say, like, yes, I am actually very nervous in those moments, but it's like, that's the nervous I embrace. I want those moments and I'm never afraid to fail in them. And I thought that was great.
A lot of great players have said a similar thing as well. A lot of all-time greats have said you could call it a nervousness or an excitement or just a feeling you get before big games, before big moments. And I'm kind of with him, before a big podcast, I'm a little nervous too.
Are you a little nervous right now? Is this the pressure's on?
Before an emergency pod, you kind of feel it in your bones a little bit.
Now here's another big insightful thing. And I'm actually makes me think a lot. He mentions that he loves to be very mentally prepared for games. And, he obviously just experiences he says, I played against everybody. I know everybody's tendencies. But then he says every now and then a team will throw something at him that he's never seen, and it will throw him off. And then he specifically cited that one time they had McDaniels, the Wolves, guarded him with McDaniels, and they put Anthony Edwards on Jamal, and it really caused us problems. And I'm sitting here thinking, I think I know what game that is. I think that's game 2 of the playoffs 2 years ago when Rudy Gobert was not there because of the birth of his child. We all thought Denver's for sure bouncing back. I think it was game 2. For sure Denver's bouncing back after a tough game 1, and they get blown out. And the reason I bring this up is I've long thought Jokic is like Peyton Manning in some ways, where I thought maybe the best way to beat Jokic is to throw something at him, no matter how dumb and solvable it is, something that's so different that he just, because he wants to, in his mind, he already knows step 1, 2, 3, option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's mapped it out. But when you throw a curveball at him, he's like, wait a second, I have to process this. And I think back to that game against the Wolves where we all thought they were going to win because there's no Gobert and Denver's desperate. And instead they got killed because it was something completely different.
I think it's a really good take. I mean, that's also probably why they got killed by the Warriors like they did. Maybe that was one of the reasons.
Yeah.
Just recently, when Draymond Green's supposed to start, he doesn't play and Al Horford does, and it changes the dynamic. But you're right. He thinks everything through to such a degree that we'll never really understand. He sees moves 3, 4, 5 times ahead. He knows the game plan to that extent. And yeah, like switching up on the fly, he has to rethink everything in real time.
I think it might be something that it's almost a weird vulnerability, I think, for Yoke. And I always thought this with Peyton Manning when you watched him, where he could just dump. Mm-hmm. Who was it? Reed, who tells the story one time about how all year he would not do a specific coverage, and he got a touchdown scored on him in the regular season because he wanted to set a trap for Peyton Manning in the playoffs. And he was like, I knew the only way to beat him was to I had to use the whole season setting it up just so that for that one play. And I almost feel like that's what it takes, and I almost worry that if you get into a game 5 situation, is it worth it doing something somewhat insane, but just also that's such a curveball that it's like, wait a second, Yoke mapped this game out, and this is not at all something that was on his radar.
Yeah, like putting Keontae George on him. Would that qualify?
Sadly, this took place before that, because I would have loved to get these
right.
questions about like how much he's getting beat up. Here's another one that's fascinating to me. He was so defensive of the superiority of NBA basketball, which surprises me as a guy coming from Europe. He said, listen, the NBA has by far the best players in the NBA or in the world. These guys are unbelievable talented. And then he says, if anybody tells you that they do not play defense in the NBA, they don't know what they're talking about. And then he stops. He goes, well, maybe they just haven't watched. But if they've watched and they still say that, they don't know what they're talking about. And I'm just so surprised by that I don't know if he would have had that perspective 10 years ago, but he was very defensive, I thought, of the NBA and how good the players are, how good the games are, how good the teams are, and how complicated the defenses are.
I mean, I feel like that comes from 11 years now in the league for him. He's seen so many iterations of teams and schemes. And just think about all the defensive schemes he's gone against. I think it might be different. I mean, he's obviously right with this take, and it is ridiculous when people say, "Oh, they don't play defense." Like, just look at film from 10 years ago, or look at anything overseas. But think about all the different, elaborate, calculated defensive schemes that Nikola Jokic has gone against. People really dedicate their whole seasons to finding ways to stop him. So. Yeah. Honestly, if there's anybody to talk about the level of defense in the NBA, it's probably him.
Honestly, probably truly is. And that part of it, I think people will enjoy, just because I expected him. He even was talking about, he went as far as to say, go look at Eurobasket, who's dominating the NBA guys.
Right.
And he's saying they're scoring even as many points as they do in the NBA. So if you think these schemes are going to work against them just because it's, tougher or better, more defensive, he's like, Luka still destroys, Markkanen still destroys in all of those matchups. Very defensive of it. I thought it was interesting.
For sure.
You want to do a quick ad read here in the middle? I got a couple more notes, including the next note I have for you guys is there's a moment very recently where he had an enormous amount of self-doubt. I'd never heard this story before.
Yeah, that was really interesting too. Want to shout out Xfinity. This emergency podcast sponsored and presented by Xfinity. Your team's starting lineup may change, but the price of your internet will not. You can lock in that 5-year price guarantee from Xfinity. Xfinity, imagine that.
So the line I'm talking about, Aiden, he's like, I don't know if I should share this, but I'm going to share it. He's like, I was very surprised a few years back because he was in town and he's watching Nikola play and they lose a game, a heartbreaking game, regular season. I think regular season. I'm not sure if it's specified. But he's talking to Aiden afterwards and he says, maybe I'm not as good as they say I am. That's a line Jokic says allegedly to Aiden. And part of me is like, Jokic is just so honest or these things, but also, what do you make of that? Because it sounds to me like self-doubt.
Well, I mean, I'd love to know when that was said. I mean, was that said after, was that pre-championship? Was that post-championship? Was that after one of these game 7s recently? Because I feel like when it's said probably would be very telling, but I'm with you. It also says a lot about Nikola Jokic, the person. If Anthony Edwards would ever say that type of thing.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, he didn't say this publicly. He said it privately, and years later now it's shared. So,
yeah,
it's an interesting moment.
But even privately, there are a lot of guys who would never let themselves think like that. Mm-hmm. They would never let themselves say that out loud. But I think it's some insight into just how Nikola Jokic thinks that crossed his mind and he said it, and what happened that made him say it.
He wanted to be very clear that, he said some things we know about. He prefers 5 games in 7 days because he just loves being in a rhythm. And it sounds like he loves playing as much as possible. So days off, he hates. But one of the things he said, he wanted to make it very clear. And I had actually never heard this rumor before. And we're steeped in Nuggets rumors and everything else. But he was like, people say I fired Michael Malone. That is not the case at all. And I remember thinking, I have not heard this from anybody. So I'm so surprised that was even a thing he had heard. But he had said that the way it went down was that Josh had met with him when the decision was already made, and they informed him and basically asked him, how do you feel about it? And his response was, it sounds like you asking that you already know the answer or something like that. But he said, by no means was I the one that or asked him to be fired or gave a blessing or anything like that.
Well, and he also said that Josh came over to his house.
Yeah.
Which I did not know. All the reporting that we had heard made it sound like this was like in the locker room or in an office at Ball Arena or something.
Yeah.
Josh Kroenke came over to his house, and Yoke said he was sunbathing, and then he actually was opening a package from, was it Nikola Vucevic, who sent him bottles of tequila?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Was it Vucevic? It might have been. Who sent him bottles of tequila that he was opening as Josh Kroenke walks through the door, and he says, Josh, it's not what it looks like. I'm not celebrating this firing.
Yeah.
By opening bottles of tequila.
That's so funny, man. I kind of get the feeling from this interview, though, that our boy drinks quite a bit. I mean, alcohol, he even says in here that mentally, one of the reasons he doesn't speak up more as a leader is because he's preserving his emotional and mental fatigue. And I've heard before, I mean, we hear this all the time from people behind the scenes with the Nuggets that they're like, Yoke's rarely physically exhausted or, whatever. His body, does do this. But it is the season is just so mentally draining for him. All of the different layers of it. And then he talked about that part of it about, hey, one of the reasons I don't scream and yell at guys is that's, I have to protect my emotional reserve.
Yeah. But then there are those moments when the emotion comes out.
Yeah.
And like, boy, when it comes out, it comes out.
But it does kind of give an insight to that when he does that, it costs him. And he even talked about when he goes home after games, it's not easy to wind down. Like the game, you get over, he might get home. If it's a home game, he might get home at 1, 2 in the morning. But even then, he said it's still a long wind down period. And then he mentioned again, but luckily we have things that help us wind down, referencing alcohol. like that's the thing that helps him like wind down. So
the emotional leader stuff and the vocal leader stuff is so interesting because if you think back to late last season, the Nuggets fire Michael Malone. They promote David Adelman. And all of a sudden we see Nikola Jokic being more vocal on the sidelines and in the huddle than ever. And I mean, obviously he thought there needed to be a shift. There needed to be somebody who steps up as the vocal leader because that was Michael Malone and it was him.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that, at times this season, but not nearly as much as we did down the stretch of last season and in the playoffs.
But I think it makes sense now to think that, that costs. That's not something that just like, I got an extra energy to throw into this too. And I think it's part of why he really reiterated that a good coach has to be that for a team. He has to be the leader. And so I think that's how he views this as every time we see him being that way to the team, it's probably an extra reserve of energy he's spending to do so. Even if it's just mental energy, it's very taxing. I got a couple more for you here. This one, I loved it because I thought it was the only time I've ever heard a player say this, that he hates how much old legends will shit on the modern NBA. He hates how much they will talk trash and complain about players and this or that. He says it's very natural that the game will get better over time. And he even says, like, he kind of references of the old-time greats. Of course, they're always great. They'll always be great. But it would be insane to think that the players from 40 years ago could just, that the game hasn't progressed. But he's also very gracious in this, and I've seen him have interviews about the next generation. They're going to come and do everything I did and more. Like to him, it's this thing of everybody standing on the shoulders. But he was very defensive of this is the best basketball has ever been.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a guy who now is an absolute student of the game. I mean, he's watched the legends for sure. He's watched the Hall of Fame big men that have come through this league and paved the path. And I'm with you. I think he has a really good balance of appreciation for the era that came before him and the greats of the game. I mean, we just saw him, seem really appreciative of saying what's up to Patrick Ewing.
Yeah.
On the sideline before the Knicks game, which was really cool.
And vice versa. You could tell Ewing, I love if you haven't seen that interaction, it was great. I love the way Ewing stopped with him, kind of stops, shakes his hand and like looks him in the eye and just telling him, what was the line he said? Something like, I love your game or something like that.
Yeah. Which is what all the greats say.
I was thinking about this. Jokic, is a rare example, because what's funny is this question was actually led in by a question about Hakeem, who I feel has been very gracious towards the new generation. I actually think Hakeem, you know, there's some players he doesn't like, but for the most part, he loves Jokic. And he often, for an all-time great player, he often talks glowingly about the modern NBA. So I was interested that was the prompt that led him to thinking about this. It almost felt like he was attacking Hakeem. But I was thinking about this where Jokic is a very rare example where his game is both modern but classic. You know, like I think Jokic appeals to old heads because there's something like transcendent about the way he plays that doesn't feel like the modern NBA. It feels as much like the modern NBA as it does of the NBA of the 60s.
Yeah, he really is one of the rare guys that has mixed the super old school game with 2026.
And it's not even just the style. It's like the approach. It's the soul of what he does, I think, feels familiar to the new generation in a way that not all players do. I think there's some players that the older generation probably looks at and is like, what is this? Is it even basketball? Jokic is a center who shoots threes and brings the ball up the court and passes and does stuff that is very abnormal. And yet the old heads look at it and are like, yeah, that looks familiar.
And yet he has the smoothest, drop step game in the league.
Did you see Jackson Hayes the other day, by the way, talking about him?
No.
Jackson Hayes was interviewed about Nikola after the game, and he said he's the best footwork I've ever seen, or something like that. He's the best footwork in the NBA.
Right.
He just talk about he did the classic thing where he's just like, I don't know how to do anything against him. Like, if finesse, he just overpowers me. If I try to get physical, he finesses me. He has the best footwork. And I loved it. You got to hate it if you're the Lakers, because they got DeAndre Ayton, who will quit 5 minutes into every game he plays against Jokic. And then you have Jackson Hayes, who's like openly just like, I don't know what to do. That guy, he doesn't even feel me. He just does whatever he wants. Yeah. If you're the Lakers, you got to feel a little weird about that one. The last thing I have for you, it's the most important. Actually, two more things. One, he was asked about who he likes in the NBA, like who he likes watching. Very interesting answers.
So this was maybe the most interesting part because we just have never heard this stuff before, man. And so many athletes are so public with their feelings about this stuff. And Jokic is so reserved and so private. Just hearing these kinds of things was so cool to hear.
Anthony Edwards. Big fan of Anthony Edwards. He mentioned the Toronto Raptors, which is another, I guess because maybe the coach.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Maybe. Who else was in the list of teams he likes watching? Oh, Oklahoma City?
Well, he likes watching Oklahoma City, and I thought this was really interesting. He said, I like watching Oklahoma, he called them, because of how they hit, how they play, how they compete, all five the same. That was interesting to me.
Has a lot of respect for Oklahoma City, which is kind of interesting. And then Anthony Edwards, same thing. And he said, and it's rare, I think because it's in Serbian that he can get away with these things, but he's like, that guy is a monster on defense if he wants to be, like when he wants to be. Basically,
I think that's 100% true.
It is true.
I mean, yeah. He also said he likes watching the Hawks a lot recently because of Jalen Johnson. He called him a little fawn, like a little deer.
What?
And he said, that guy is good.
I love that he loves my favorite players. We're really so similar here, except for Oklahoma City. Too personal for me. The last one I have, though, as scary as it might be to hear him rave about Anthony Edwards and how much he admires him, Nikola was asked about, and he once mentioned it unprovoked, where he talked about winning a championship and how much it means to him to get what he called an organic championship, meaning in the city you were drafted. But then later on, he really does speak pretty candidly about his desire just to be in Denver. And I know we always get comments, including, and I would say we get more comments from Serbians than from anybody else that are like, I hope he leaves. He's going to leave, you guys. You're a bum organization and all this stuff. And we go, first of all, we know we're a bum organization. We've been watching this team our whole lives, so you don't have to tell us. We know Denver is not a premier NBA, doesn't have a premier NBA history in terms of championships. But what I love about Nikola is he seems to understand the virtue of all of this. And he really said, he's never come out and just said, I'm staying in Denver my whole career. He's alluded to it a lot. But I thought the way he framed it in this one just made me feel extra confident that what he wants out of all of this, he found peace in Denver. He found a home in Denver. His kids are raised here, but also the organization. And his goal is not to win as many championships as he can. It's to win as many as he can in Denver. And to me, it's like, you know what? I think he has the right perspective on all of this.
Yeah, I agree. It was probably the biggest single revealing thing from the interview. He said he didn't even want to imagine playing basketball anywhere else other than on the Nuggets in Denver. And I mean, the really key word I feel like was, he said, I found my life here.
Man.
And like, this is his life. You know, he's been here for 11 years. Like, he's got married here. You know, he found his wife. You know, they built a family together. Obviously, the basketball stuff. Like, his life is here. And yeah, he has a huge part of his life in Serbia, of course, and he always will. But, you know, everybody is here and his life is here. And it seems like he's very, not just happy with that, but he's content with that. He's kind of settled on that now. Like, he's very comfortable with that.
And not only comfortable with it, but that like his goal is not just to collect champion. I mean, we all know about this, that he doesn't really care about legacy in that way. And I think for you to chase rings, to go to another team, like we all know Jokic could win a lot of championships. If he forced his way to the perfect situations and did this or that, he could probably win multiple. I don't think he cares about those things. I think to him, success is just, can you do it here? Can you do it organically, as he called it? And then he was even talking about Akeem in Toronto and how like painful it is to even look at the photo of Akeem wearing something other than a Rockets jersey, which gives you some insight into it. I just thought it was great, and it should put our minds at ease. Any other final thoughts here on this interview? It's 2 hours long, and there's a lot of great details. You learn a lot about his psychology.
Yeah, it was fascinating. You got to go watch it. It was 2 hours long. Here's the last thing I'll say. It seemed like, you know, Nikola Jokic, when we see him in a media environment, it's, you know, something he's required to do. It's something he's paid to do. It's something that, you know, I don't think he wants to do after every game exactly. And sure, I mean, he's absolutely okay to feel that way. It actually seemed like he had some things he wanted to get off his chest in this interview.
I have a theory about this.
There were some things that he was excited to say. There were questions asked, and he answered them, and then he went a different direction because there were things he stopped the
interview a few times. Yep.
Yes, and I have never seen that before. Yeah,
I agree. There's a couple times where he stops, like, hold on. I want to talk about this other thing. Like, it's really interesting.
And it was just really cool to see him in that type of environment.
Here's my theory. Yoke hates this. He hates that we're reacting now to his. He hates that we have an emergency podcast breaking down what it means. Yeah. But I mean, that is the nature of the beast. And I think when he does an interview in Serbian, it's just so much less likely to go. Like a little line will go viral. You know, he knows the things that will, but some of the other stuff won't go nearly as viral. And I think that's why he's more open. He just hates the content machine that is around the NBA. And to be honest, I get it. I understand it.
And it's also like a post-game press conference. It's part of the NBA that he hates. Yeah. You know, he hates the circus around it. He hates all the extra things around it. This is just him talking with a friend.
But think about this. He doesn't even like, when he was talking about the scouting reports, how he doesn't just like to talk about them. He has to experience them.
Right.
It's the same. So after a game, it's like, talk about the game. He's like, I don't even like to do this in preparation, let alone on reflection. You know, like those things are not, that's to him, it just doesn't seem to make sense. You got to check it out. It's a fantastic interview. We thought we'd do an emergency pod just to kind of put it on everybody's radar and break down some of the stuff we thought was in there. But I'm telling you, this show doesn't do it justice. It's a 2-hour pod. You have to read it all, and you're going to want to check it out. This was an emergency pod that was presented by Xfinity. Imagine that. We're back tomorrow as the Nuggets try to claw out of this rut that they're in. I'm split. I don't know how I'm going to wake up tomorrow, if I'm going to feel optimistic or pessimistic. But I will say I flip a coin because I go back and forth. I'm not really sure.
I mean, now knowing that Nikola Jokic likes watching the Thunder, I might feel a little differently about this match. I might be personally more excited for it now.
And Jamal Murray questionable, not just out. So,
yeah.
Let's see what happens. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Go check out that show, X's and O's, interview with Jokic. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
We all silly like the mayor.